Somewhere along the way you named a number. Maybe you never said it out loud, but it was in there. When we have that much, we will be fine. And then one day you got there, and the feeling you had been expecting did not arrive. What arrived instead was a new number. That is what I want to talk about today. Not how much is enough. Why enough does not feel like enough, even when you get there. I am Sam, and this is the channel about the part of money that happens in your head rather than in your account. Let me start with what the research actually says, because this subject is full of half-remembered headlines, and I would rather give you the real shape of it. In 2010, two researchers at Princeton, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, published work that became famous fast. They found that day-to-day happiness rose along with income, but that above about $75,000 a year, it leveled off. Money helped, and then it stopped helping. That finding went everywhere because it told people something they wanted to hear. There is a ceiling. Past that point, chasing more is pointless. Then in 2021, a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania named Matthew Killingsworth published work that found the opposite. In his data, happiness kept rising with income well past that mark. No ceiling, no plateau. So you have two serious researchers with two opposite answers to the same question. Normally in this situation, each side digs in and the argument lasts a generation. What happened instead is unusual enough that I think it is worth telling you about. In 2023, the two of them worked together, along with Barbara Mellers, on what is called an adversarial collaboration. Rather than argue, they went back into the data together specifically to find out why they had reached different answers and published the result in a scientific journal. Here is what they found, and I want to say it carefully. On average, higher income did keep going with higher happiness, and it kept going past the old ceiling. So Killingsworth was right about the general trend. But inside every income group there was a minority who were unhappy, and for that group, happiness rose sharply up to around $100,000 a year and then flattened out. More money after that did not move them. Now, two things about those numbers before anybody starts doing arithmetic on themselves. They are working income figures from a very large American data set, not retirement figures, and not a target for your savings. And they describe averages across many thousands of people, not a rule about any one person. Nobody can look at your life and predict your mood from your balance. But there is something in that result worth sitting with, and it is the part that gets left out of headlines. For most people, more money did keep helping. And for a certain group, it stopped helping entirely at a level that most of the world would consider a great deal of money, which tells you that whatever that group was carrying, money was not the thing that fixed it. I think a lot of people watching this recognize something in that. Because you can be objectively fine, by any measure a stranger would apply, and still feel the low hum that says not yet, not safe yet, not enough yet. So let me talk about why that happens, because in my experience it comes down to four things, and none of them are about the amount. The first is that the number moves. This is nearly universal and almost nobody notices it happening. You set a target when you are 40. You reach it at 58. But by the time you arrive, you have been living at a different level for years. You know more about what things cost, and you have seen other people's lives up close. So the target quietly updates. It does not feel like moving the goalposts. It feels like getting more realistic. And that is the trap, because a number that updates every time you approach it is not a target. It is a horizon. You can walk toward a horizon for 40 years and never arrive, and there is nothing wrong with your walking. The second thing is that saving is a skill you practice for decades, and skills do not switch off. Think about what you actually trained yourself to do. Spend less than you make. Delay the thing you want. Watch the balance. Feel a small unease when money goes out and a small relief when it comes in. You did that 10,000 times. You got good at it. It is not a spreadsheet habit, it is a nervous system habit. And then one day you were supposed to reverse it. The same person who felt uneasy watching money leave is now supposed to watch it leave on purpose, every month, on schedule, forever. Nobody trains for that part. So the discomfort you feel is not a sign that your plan is wrong. It is a sign that your plan changed and your reflexes did not. The third thing is that money became the way you measured yourself. This one is quieter, and I want to be careful with it, because it is not a criticism. For a lot of people, especially people who did not start with much, the growing balance was proof. Proof that the early years were survived, that the discipline was real, that you would not end up where somebody in your family ended up. The number was not just money. It was evidence, and evidence has to keep coming. That is the nature of proof, which is why arriving at a target does not feel like arriving. It feels like a checkpoint, and then you look for the next one, because you never actually wanted the number. You wanted the feeling the number was supposed to prove. The fourth thing is comparison, and it does not stop in retirement. It just changes what it looks at. At 30, it was houses and job titles. At 70, it is who is still traveling, whose children are nearby, who is paying for what without checking, and increasingly, who is still well. Same machinery, different objects. And comparison has a nasty property. It always finds someone. There is no amount that puts you above it, because the comparison set moves up with you. That is why people who worry about money at 40,000 keep worrying at 400,000. The number changed. The habit did not. There is a fifth thing, and it belongs to our age group specifically, so I want to give it its own space. When you were working, the number had a friend. It had income coming in beside it. If something went wrong, there was another paycheck on the way, and that fact sat underneath every decision you made, whether you thought about it or not. In retirement, that friend leaves. The balance is still there, and for many people it is the largest it has ever been. But now it is alone. There is nothing arriving behind it. And a number with nothing arriving behind it feels completely different from the same number with a paycheck behind it. Same figure on the same statement. Entirely different feeling in the chest. I think this explains something that puzzles a lot of families. Somebody who spent freely at 55 when they had less becomes cautious at 68 with more. The children look at that and conclude their parent has become fearful with age. They have not become fearful. The structure underneath the money changed, and the caution is a reasonable response to a real difference. It is just calibrated wrong, because the caution usually keeps growing long after the plan has actually accounted for it. That is worth saying plainly to yourself, because it puts the feeling in the right box. What you are feeling is not greed, and it is not weakness. It is what happens when the safety net that stood behind your money for 40 years is taken away, and only the money is left standing there. And there is one more version of this that I hear from people who did everything right. They tell me they are not worried about themselves at all. They are worried about being a burden. They want to leave something. They want to be the parent who helped rather than the parent who needed help. That is a good motive, and I am not going to talk anybody out of it. But notice what it does to the target. A number for yourself has a natural end, because you can estimate a life. A number for not being a burden has no end at all, because you cannot estimate somebody else's future. So the second one grows without limit unless you deliberately put a boundary on it. If that is your version, the work is to name the boundary in words. What specifically am I trying to make sure never happens, and what would be a reasonable provision for it? Then you have a number with an edge instead of a fear with a bank account. All right, so what do you do about it? Because I do not want to leave you with a diagnosis and no work. 3 questions. They are not clever, and that is on purpose. Question 1. What is the number actually for? Not how much. What for? Say it in a sentence with people and activities in it, not dollars. To stay in this house and have the grandchildren come at Christmas. To not be a burden if my health goes. To take one real trip a year while my knees still work. That matters because a number without a purpose can never be reached. It has no finish line. A number with a purpose can be checked against reality, and often you find you have already got it and nobody told you. Question 2. What would actually have to be true for you to say the word enough? If the answer is a bigger number, ask the follow-up. And when you had that, what would be true then? Ask it 3 times. If the honest answer is that no number ends the feeling, then you have learned the most useful thing in this whole subject. What you are managing is not a savings problem. It is a fear that has attached itself to a savings account because that is the only place you had a lever. Fear that has picked a proxy is common. Naming it does not solve it, but it does stop you from spending another 10 years on a solution that was never going to work. Question 3. What is the smallest true expression of the thing you say you are saving for? If it is time with the grandchildren, what is the cheapest version of more of that this month? If it is security, is there one specific thing that would genuinely make you feel safer? Not a bigger balance, a specific thing. Do that one small thing. And then notice what actually happens to the feeling. That last part matters more than the money, because the belief underneath all of this is that the feeling waits at the end of the accumulation. Test it in miniature. Spend a little for the actual purpose, and watch whether the feeling responds. For a lot of people it does, and the relief is out of all proportion to the amount. For some, it does not, and that is information too. Better to learn it with a small sum this year than with a big one at 80. I want to leave you with something a man told me once, and I have never improved on it. He said, I spent 30 years building a fence so I would feel safe, and then I spent 10 more years making it taller. And one day my wife asked me what exactly was out there, and I did not have an answer. That was the day the fence was finished. You get to decide when the fence is finished. That decision is not made by the balance. It is not made by the market. It is made by you, On an ordinary afternoon, when you look at what you have and say the sentence out loud, "This is enough for what I actually want it for." And here's the strange thing. Saying it does not put your money at risk. It does not mean you stop being careful. Nothing in your plan changes. The only thing that changes is that you stop paying interest on a feeling. If you have named a number, tell me in the comments whether it moved on you. I would bet most of you say yes, and I think it helps people to see how ordinary that is. I am Sam. Decide what enough means, then go cut the grass.